The crimson sand of Varix Prime stretched endlessly under twin suns, their harsh light creating a wasteland where few dared to venture. In the shadow of jagged rocks, a small figure lay crumpled, her blue-scaled skin dulled by pain and exhaustion. Kira had been running for 3 days now, her people's ancient enemies having finally tracked down her settlement. The Dominion had shown no mercy, destroying everything in their path with cold efficiency. Blood seeped from the gash across her shoulder where a plasma bolt had grazed her during the escape. Her water reserves had run dry yesterday, and the twin suns were slowly cooking her alive. Every breath felt like swallowing fire, and her vision blurred at the edges. She had accepted that this desolate planet would be her tomb. The sound of engines made her press deeper into the rocky crevice. More hunters, perhaps. The Dominion was thorough in their extermination campaigns. But these engines sounded different, rougher, more primitive than the sleek warships that had burned her world. A battered cargo hauler settled onto the sand. Nearby, its hull scarred by countless journeys through hostile space. A hatch opened with a pneumatic hiss, and a bipedal figure emerged. Kira had heard stories of these creatures humans. They called themselves newcomers to the galactic stage, considered primitive by most civilized species. This one wore simple work clothes and carried what appeared to be a basic medical kit. His brown hair was streaked with gray, and concern etched lines around his weathered eyes. "Easy there," the human said softly, approaching her hiding spot with hands raised peacefully. "I'm not going to hurt you. My name is Tom." Kira tried to speak, but only managed a weak rasp. Her throat felt like scorched metal. Tom knelt beside her, his movements careful and non-threatening. He pulled out a small scanner, running it over her wounds with practiced efficiency. Dehydration, plasma burn, possible internal bleeding, he muttered to himself. "We need to get you out of this heat." Without waiting for permission, Tom scooped her up in his arms. Despite her species typically being larger than humans, malnutrition had left her lightweight. She should have been suspicious of his motives, but something in his manner suggested genuine concern rather than opportunism. The interior of his ship was cramped but clean. Tom placed her on a small medical cot and immediately began administering fluids through an IV line. His hands moved with surprising skill for someone who wasn't a trained medic. "Used to be a combat engineer," he explained, noticing her questioning look. "Picked up field medicine out of necessity. You're going to be okay." Over the following hours, Tom worked tirelessly to stabilize her condition. He shared his rations without hesitation, gave her his own blanket when she shivered, and never once asked what she was running from. When Dominion patrol ships passed overhead, he powered down all systems and waited in silence until they moved on dot as Kira's strength returned. She learned more about her unlikely rescuer. Tom was a freelance courier who had been delivering supplies to Outer Rim colonies when he detected her heat signature. He had no military training, no special weapons, and his ship was barely holding together. Yet he had risked everything to help a stranger. Why? She finally asked, her voice still weak but functional. "Your kind has no obligation to mine. We are not allies." Tom paused in his equipment maintenance, considering her question. Maybe not officially, but suffering is universal. I've seen what the Dominion does to worlds that resist them. Nobody deserves that fate. 3 days later, Kira was strong enough to sit up properly. Tom had changed course completely, abandoning his original delivery schedule to take her to a neutral station where her people maintained a small embassy. The detour would cost him significant credits, but he seemed unconcerned about the financial loss. "There's something else," Tom said during their final evening together. "I've been monitoring Dominion communications. They're planning another sweep of this sector. Your people need to be warned." He handed her a datapad containing intercepted transmissions. The intelligence was in valuable locations, timing, fleet compositions, information that could save thousands of lives. "How did you obtain this?" Kira asked, amazed. "Turns out our primitive human technology has some advantages." Tom smiled grimly. "We're good at making things the Dominion doesn't expect to encounter." At the neutral station, word of Tom's rescue spread quickly through diplomatic circles. Other species began to take notice of humanity's actions, not their weapons or technology, but their willingness to risk everything for strangers. Several governments quietly began reaching out to Earth, seeking alliances based on shared values rather than military might. Kira never forgot the human who had saved her life without expecting anything in return. Years later, when she had risen to become an ambassador for her people, she would often tell the story of Tom the Courier, how humanity's greatest strength wasn't their adaptability or their innovation, but their capacity for compassion, even in the darkest circumstances. The galaxy was vast and often cruel, filled with empires that conquered through fear and species that valued power above all else. But somewhere in that darkness, humans flew battered cargo ships and stopped to help strangers dying in the sand. They proved that civilization wasn't measured by the sophistication of one's weapons, but by the willingness to extend a hand to those in need. In a universe where survival often meant abandoning others to their fate, humanity had chosen a different path. They had shown that even the smallest acts of kindness could ripple outward, changing the course of civilizations and proving that hope could flourish in the most unlikely places.